So, you want to know when the Forbidden List was coming out? Well, I actually just made a program through Python to hack into Konami's mainframe to figure out what they're doing. And, apparently they don't know what they're doing either. There's really nothing here but gibberish about world domination by getting every content creator's costly ID and then using their slot machines in mobile games to take over the world. One thing that I did find out, which I guess can be important information, is that the Forbidden List will come out when you least expect it. It will ban a card that was problematic a long time ago, and no one will be happy. What's going on with ya, big dog? And it is Update Monday! It has been 1 year, 8 months, and 3 weeks of kicking rheumatoid arthritis' ass, boy! My guys, I'm built different! One thing I have to say is that these past few weeks have not been good for me mentally. I feel like the channel has been going in a downhill view-wise, and it's really because I'm trying to push my series like archetype analysis and duel challenge. But one thing I do know is that even when we're in a rut, we can always pull ourselves out of it and be too strong. So I want you guys to do the same if you're in the same position. Speaking of such, the Yu-Gi-Oh format is technically in that position. We've been receiving it doggy style from Konami. That's sus as fuck. We've been getting a raw end of the deal from that is also sus. Konami has been fucking us without taking us on a date. That's pretty fair. As optimistic as I would like to stay and as beautiful as the format could be, in overallness, I think most people would agree when I say that this format is completely terrible in terms of game design. But don't worry, me and my Twitch boys. By the way, if you guys haven't followed me on Twitch, go ahead and follow me on Twitch. That's Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'll be streaming today. We actually built what we thought was the perfect Forbidden List together to be able to address a lot of the problems. So with this particular perfect Forbidden List, I actually want to be able to address 3 things in Yu-Gi-Oh! The first thing is that we need to be able to address the power creep in the current top Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks. I think that's going to be pivotal for being able to balance the format, because even if we do bring older archetypes new support or more cards off the Forbidden List, it won't matter if the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! Are just power crept and dominant. The second thing we're going to do is actually going to lend into what I just said. We're going to give underserved decks more support, cards that probably shouldn't be on the Forbidden List any longer because the deck was power creeped and does need that boost. Finally, we're going to address future problems with the game design and decks. We want this Yu-Gi-Oh! Format to be as enjoyable as possible, and we don't want a particular mechanic or strategy to be overly dominant. Ironically, when we constructed a perfect Forbidden List on Twitch, hundreds of people agreed that Barrier Statue is a card that should be banned, and it's for a couple of reasons. The first thing is that floodgates are pretty bad in Yu-Gi-Oh! But they become exponentially worse when they become searchable floodgates, which can be very problematic in a game where there's not enough wind monsters to be able to compensate for that. And I know what you're probably thinking, the other barrier statues should also be banned as well, but currently there's no way to have these cards as searchable cards, and I don't think that the light or the dark one would actually be good at any point in time. And that's just simply because Konami has made an imbalance in Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards. There are far more powerful light and dark monsters in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game than there are wind, and that's also a reason why the wind barrier statue should be banned as opposed to the others. Now, of course, you're probably expecting me to address the elephant in the room, which is the most powerful deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! In Tearlaments. It is considered a tier 0 Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck. Literally. It's also getting support in the new Photon Hypernova set, so how exactly would I address Tearlaments? It's actually fairly simple. Ironically, in order to address the power creep that Tearlaments have, I don't think that you ban any of the Tearlaments cards, you just ban the Ishizu cards. The Ishizu cards allow them to be able to shuffle in other resources that they normally wouldn't, as well as disrupt the opponent and allow you to send cards off the top of your deck, which will allow your deck to propel even further. With Medora, Kelbeck, Keldo, and Agito banned, the deck will probably revert to an older version of Tearlaments that actually was not tier 0. I genuinely don't know why anybody thought about this.
Big Brain Cali always coming in with the clutch.
Now, I'm not necessarily done there. Moving on to limited, Tearlaments Halfness is going to be a very solid limit. This prevents that power creep effect that Tearlaments have, being able to consistently summon Halfness to their side of the field on turn 0 and potentially get some fusion plays. One thing that I've noticed is that it's a deck that gains a lot of advantage from being able to play on your turn and then being able to cycle its resources as well as disrupt the opponents. You take those two and the gap between that deck and the other decks becomes a lot lot closer, as now some more of the counter cards become a lot more effective against them, like the Bestials. Some other cards being brought out for this perfect forbidden list is Block Dragon. Block Dragon is actually an interesting card that not a lot of players want off the forbidden list, but it actually serves a really big purpose for this particular list.
Joey, what are you doing? You can't bring back Block Dragon. It's broken.
My guy, have you played Yu-Gi-Oh recently? Everything's broken. Block Dragon is actually a deck that supports Earth decks like Adamanticators, which is really good for Yu-Gi-Oh! One huge complaint I've noticed in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community is that the bestial monsters are ridiculously powerful. And it's fair to think that, because most decks are light and dark based, but if we bring out some more very competitive decks that aren't light and dark based, it actually makes the bestial monsters weaker. I'm gonna also go ahead and bring a few other cards off the forbidden list, one being Magispector Unicorn Kirin, a card that players probably forgot that was even on the forbidden list, the rest of the Dragon Rulers in Red Ox Blaster in title, as well as Thunder Dragon Colossus. The Dragon Rulers themselves actually support the theme that I was talking about when it comes to Block Dragon, while also not being a powerful deck in itself. It's still limited, so couldn't even be possible. Thunder Dragon Colossus has actually proven itself to be a fair Yu-Gi-Oh card, not only in Master Duel, but in the OCG, but there's actually a little bit of method to my madness. Thunder Dragon Colossus is a boost to the Thunder Dragon strategy, which is a light and dark based deck that can use the Bestials and are immune to the Bestials. I didn't want the Bestial cards to become completely irrelevant in case Tearlaments still was a really good deck, and the Thunder Dragon deck would be powerful enough to be able to rival the Tearlament deck with Colossus at 1. Also, lastly, I almost forgot, one more card that I need to hit on Tearlaments is Tearlaments Kid Kalos. One thing I've noticed about Tearlaments is that they would only play one copy of Tearlament Kid Kalos until that one Kid Kalos got threatened. From there, they would just move up the copies of Tearlament Kid Kalos to avoid being threatened by certain cards that would banish the card, and then once the threat went away, they went down to 1. By limiting Tearlament Kid Kalos, I'm taking away their flexibility to be able to play more copies, so if a player does make it a priority to get rid of said card, it's actually going to be beneficial. Basically, what I'm saying is that I got one in the chamber for Tearlaments, but just in case, I got 15 other ways to counter the deck inside of this particular forbidden list. Always have a backup plan, or you're gonna wind up with kids. What? At semi-limited Kashtira Finra as well as Kashtira Unicorn would be a very good idea. I don't think it's a great idea to kill the deck, but limiting the deck's consistency, especially seeing that it is going to be a deck that's going to have a lot of power, is going to be key here. This deck ironically has a ton of in-game counters that we're actually going to be bringing off the list anyways. I think with this particular list, it won't be as powerful, though it still will be pretty good. For semi-limited, it's going to be Orchestral Horror. I did this for multiple reasons. The first reason is to keep bestial monsters relevant because I don't want them to fall completely off the face of the earth. That is a good counter for Tearlaments. The second is because Orchestral Horror is another card that has been pretty much power crept. Also bringing another card to semi-limited is Sky Striker Mobilize Engage. Sky Striker's actually got support from Magnificent Maven, so this would actually pair well with it. We've also noticed that in Master Duel, 2 Kagari and 2 Engage is not overly problematic. The biggest reason why these cards were limited was because players would splash them in every single deck. I don't think that's no longer the case anymore. And the last card I am going to put on semi-limited is going to blow your mind. I think this card can actually come to 3, and I actually predict that this card will come off the forbidden list too. It is a card that was once the most amazing card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And players, for right reason, said that it should have been limited to banned, but Called by the Grave is ironically in a totally different space now. Because of how decks like Sprite and Tearlament have been able to handle hand traps, they've been almost irrelevant against some of the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! While actually gatekeeping some of the other decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! From being extremely competitive. There's actually so many strategies in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring hurts, but when we start going against some of the top tier decks, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is a useless card. And Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is really just a placeholder. You can almost insert any hand trap. Another thing that I've noticed is that hand traps are actually moving away from being sent from hand to graveyard. Take, for example, the Bestial monsters being able to summon themselves to the side of the field, unless you are banishing a card in your own graveyard, which kind of defeats the purpose of a Bestial disrupting your opponent. Called by the Grave would be completely useless. But where Called by the Grave would actually be extremely useful for is not only helping some of those low tier decks being able to combat the hand traps, it also allows you to be able to address Tearlaments because Called by the Grave is an amazing counter to a Tearlament effect being able to fuse. Moving on to Unlimited, this is pretty much almost everybody's favorite part of the Forbidden list because we get to play with some really cool cards that hopefully can make a huge impact. I got a list here here, so allow me to ring them all. Unlimited is going to be Pot of Desires, Miscellaneous Ceres, Prank Kids Meow Meow Mew, Beatrice Lady of the Eternal, Tina Wrestler Pankertraps, Mind Control, and Solomon Great Gazelle. As you can see, just about every single one of those in limits were archetype specific. Decks that have been completely powercraft have just simply gotten better. King's Lethal Sagam, as well as other cards that I've unlimited off this list, is actually an excellent way to be able to fix the Yu-Gi-Oh card game that we're in. And I think the best way to do it is to introduce other competitive attributes. That means Earth, Wind, Fire, and Water are actually going to be viable decks. Combat the power creep of strategies being able to consistently play on your opponent's turn. I think we did a great job at that. And also give players an underserved archetype some of their favorite cards back to be able to compete with some of the top decks. Now, of course, I want to stress this again. This is not a prediction list, my friend. Don't be a goofy goober to be like,
Callie, this will never happen.
it's not that, my friend. But do go ahead and post if you agree that this would be the perfect forbidden list, or do you think that this list is complete trash? Throw it in the garbage can. It ain't it, boss. And to further help us promote and build the perfect forbidden list, we'll actually be playing under this list on my Discord. We're going to be running a few tournaments, and hopefully that can make it to the main channel, so I hope to see you there.